Hello there and welcome once again to Breakfast All Day. We are at my house today. Hooray! Christy and Matt and Alonso, and Nick is over there playing video games, some Star Wars game. Yes, he has his little headphones on so we can curse all we want. He won't be able to hear us, which we're going to do during our review of A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Mr. Rogers
shocking expose. Mr. Rogers' years when he worked blue.
The Secret Life of Fred Rogers.
Opening for Shecky Green.
Yes. Do you want to describe this, Matt?
Sure. All right. So, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is about a reporter who gets assigned to write a piece about Mr. Rogers. It's for Esquire, right?
Yeah.
It's for Esquire's Heroes article, and his editor only really wants 300 words.
400.
400, and he's irked about it. That's not the type of stuff that he does. He's more of a investigative journalist, and so he decides, sure, fine. It's because his editor told him to. Goes down to Philadelphia,
Pittsburgh. They're different cities.
Sure. Goes to Pittsburgh.
Are they?
And meets the man himself, and is not quite what he expects, and it ends up life changing. That's it.
It's interesting in this movie that you would think it's not a Mr. Rogers biopic.
No.
Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers is very much a supporting figure in this. And it's really Matthew Rhys's story as the journalist who is just bitter and angry and holding on to so much resentment and so much anger and hate toward his father, which manifests itself in every element of his life. Despite the fact that he's a new father himself, he can't look at that as an opportunity to be
Release
better.
himself
He's still holding on to all of it. And I love all of the sequences between Matthew Rhys and Tom Hanks because, as a journalist myself, you are comfortable asking the questions. You are comfortable putting somebody else in the position of having to analyze themselves and understand themselves. And so when the questions get turned back on you, it can be really disconcerting. I don't particularly mind it, but I know when I have talked to other journalist friends of mine and asked them questions, you can feel a little bit of a squirming because the dynamic is different and the rhythm is off and it's not what you're accustomed to doing. And so slowly but surely, Fred Rogers, in his very sweet way, his very disarming and pure and well-intentioned way, starts asking him, what are you angry about?
Well,
who are you angry with?
And it's not just like, sometimes people will do that, interview subjects will do that from either defensive point or, they're trying to change where the interview is going. And Rogers, the way Hanks presents him seems even less interested in that so much as he's present. He's talking to a person. And the thing is, there's a minute when Rhys gets told, hey, you're going to have to go interview this guy, he's like, oh, that corny talk show host?
Right?
Kid show host.
Right, kid show host. And you can see he can't believe that Fred Rogers is for real.
Yeah.
And the magic of Fred Rogers and the documentary goes into this a lot, right?
Right. Won't You Be My Neighbor is the documentary.
It's a terrific documentary. Is that Rogers was present for anyone he talked to. Like, he's not distracted. He's not thinking about something else. Like, he's right there in that moment, and he can tell, he's enough of a psychologist that he can tell that, this character, this person, this reporter is hurting and carrying something around. And so he sees what some of those questions communicate. And rather than just play along, Rogers, and again, a lot of it goes to where I think Tom Hanks is playing this, but it's very natural with what we know about Fred Rogers is that rather than just answer the question, he hears that as somebody in pain. Mm-hmm. And he immediately wants to, that's his focus. I'm going to address this.
Yeah, I would say if you have not seen Won't You Be My Neighbor, you should see it before you see this movie.
Why do you think that?
Because I think that, I was just talking to Dave about this, I could see where if somebody went into this movie having no idea who Fred Rogers was, having never watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, you could maybe suspect that he's a ghost. or an angel or something. Like, he is such a perfect, calm center of zen in this movie, and he's always providing this way for the Matthew Rhys character to sort of like figure himself out and to address his own pain. That, like, I think you really need to. It would help you to know a little background on this guy, because the movie doesn't really ever talk about the fact that Fred Rogers is an ordained Presbyterian minister, for instance. Like, they kind of touch on his spirituality. They talk about reading scripture or prayer or whatever.
You see him praying.
Yeah, but like they don't talk about this stuff that's so much at the core of this guy's being that I think is important to understand the character. And my thing with this movie is that, like, I didn't want it to be like the biopic version of the documentary, because those, we have the documentary and it's great and we don't need that. But I didn't care about the movie when Tom Hanks wasn't on screen. I was not fundamentally invested in Matthew Rhys's issues. He's playing a fictionalized version of Tom Juno, who did the Esquire piece.
Have you guys read that piece?
No.
They sent it to me. I haven't read it yet.
Is it great?
It is great. There's so much more in the movie that's not in that piece.
Oh.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that there's no mention of it in the piece. And so having read the piece afterwards, it's like, oh. And so I like the stuff you're having problems with, I think is made up out of whole cloth for the movie.
Well, yeah, I mean,
right?
if they changed his name, they certainly could have fictionalized things. So yeah, so that I found myself cold to the film when Hanks wasn't on screen. I just like the domestic stuff I was not crazy about. I didn't like all of, like, it's directed by Marielle Heller, who did Can You Ever Forgive Me, about a very different kind of writer. And there are some choices that she makes that kind of put me off. Like, the movie opens like an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, with Tom Hanks coming in and doing the cardigan and the shoes and everything, and then talking to the camera about the Matthew Rhys character. And I was like, oh, I don't like this. And then they do the thing where every time somebody travels somewhere, they do it like it was on Mr. Rogers, where it's all models and miniatures.
I thought that was cool.
I didn't like that either. So I don't know. And again, I know I'm in the minority. Most people are really digging this movie.
And there's an aspect ratio change as well when it's inside the TV show.
Right.
Well, right. And it makes it's like they shot it on VHS, right?
Yeah.
There's a bit of you can tell the video quality changes. Yeah, but all that said, I love Tom Hanks' performance in this movie. It is, it is Renee Zellweger as Judy level, like, disappearance into the character and like capturing the thing that made you love the real person. It's never going to substitute for the real person, but I just started crying a lot of times with just him talking. Just whether he was doing the show or whether he was giving advice to people in real life. I was just like, that carried me away, and that makes me want to send people to see the movie. But I don't love this movie without reservation the way a lot of people do, just because I think there are some choices that it makes it doesn't work, and I was not as interested as in the. It's like my week with Marilyn. I was not nearly as interested in Eddie Redmayne as I was in Marilyn Monroe, but I didn't necessarily, not that I wanted another movie that was all about Marilyn Monroe, but if you're going to give me somebody else who's the conduit to that, make that conduit more interesting.
See, I was thinking about you last night while I was watching this, Alonso, because I know we've talked on the show and just, personally about movies where there's a dying parent. It's really hard to watch. Now, I've gone through that myself too, and so I was thinking about you and wondering if that element of it with him and his father, played by Chris Cooper so beautifully, did that resonate for you?
Not that much, no. I think, man, I don't know if it's more, it's like dying moms are the ones that get me in movies, but I don't know. There was so much of their conflict that felt so like a thing in a movie as opposed to a thing that happened to somebody in real life.
It's a narrative device. I
think the better films make you more emotionally invested in that kind of thing. So yeah, I didn't get swept up in that. No,
I kind of liked the innocence of the transitional device with the neighborhood of make-believe style miniatures. I thought that was really cool. And it brings you to unexpected places, like, not just across town, but when something serious happens, it takes you in a very sweet, childlike way to that serious place, which almost makes it like diffuses the fear and the tension of it somehow, like it's gonna be okay. And I kind of like it as a stylistic choice. I found it kind of inspired, not necessarily just cutesy and obvious. I thought it was kind of cool. Okay. I like Marielle Heller, and I think she has made 3 films now that take place in a very specific kind of New York, right? It's like, she has also Diary of a Teenage Girl.
Was that New York?
Well, that was LA. I'm sorry, that was LA.
Or San Francisco.
Oh, you're right. But city life where it's like kind of grungy and kind of lived in, and not beautiful or glamorous, but just kind of blah in a believable way. And she makes that cinematic somehow. I got choked up several times watching this. I did. And I think a lot of it is just like the, is beatific a word?
Yes. Yes.
That nature that like permeates throughout the entire film is, in our sad, angry, polarized world, this is a balm.
That minute of silence moment I thought was really powerful.
Oh yeah, and it got me thinking about the thing that they're thinking about too. I'm like, who would I choose if I were asked that question?
You participate in it. It is this weird interactive moment of the movie that's very powerful, I think.
They were all grown ups at my movie. It's funny. I was thinking about a while ago when I was going to try to go to a screening of this, taking Nick with me because I dragged him with me to the documentary, and I asked the publicist, I'm like, it's PG, but can I bring Nick? Is it okay? She's like, I don't think he'd want to go. I think he'd be really bored because it's not a kid's movie at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's for adults to work through all of their trauma and their resentment, and that's no fun.
There's a lot to like here, and I get the idea of using a character who comes in cynically to kind of show how pure and how otherworldly Rogers really was. I think it's just kind of hackneyed. Hackneyed's too strong. I just think it's a little
familiar,
a little on the nose. I guess
Yeah.
it's just a little. I think there's enough to talk about with just Rogers and his life and the effect. Like, and again, I think part of it is maybe a different level of that story. It's just I guess it's not executed all that well. But, again, there is a lot to like. And I mean, there's that scene where he's on the subway in New York, and I feel like... Which is what happened. But, you see him walking around in New York, and I'm thinking, man, don't let Fred Rogers walking around New York in the 80s. Like, he's going to get killed.
How does he not get freaking mobbed walking down the street in 1998? The scene in the subway, though, seems like contrived and feel good, but that actually happened.
And I think in the hands of a lesser filmmaker, it could have played really barfy, and Heller pulls it off.
She's understated with it. It comes from a very sweet place.
Yeah, I mean, again, every time that Tom Hanks is on the screen, the movie's great. And the less of him, the farther you spend away from him, the less it's like...
Although all we see of him are his saintly elements. Like the thing about the documentary that's so fascinating is that we hear from his sons who can testify to his complicated humanity.
And they do touch on that when he talks about his sons in this movie.
Really tested me.
Yeah.
So see both.
And they give that wife the great line where... When the writer tries to refer to Rogers as saintly, she's like, I reject that term because it makes it seem like something then that humans can't aspire to. And he was a guy, and it's like, he was special and he was different and he was unique, and I think achieved a sense of balance and compassion that we can all aspire to. But I think we can aspire to it, and to make him... it's like the opposite of when people try to turn sort of, historical villains into monsters. Right. It's like, no, they were men and they were human beings, and the capacity for that awfulness or the capacity for this greatness and charity and love is in all of us, and we need to recognize that as something rather than put it in a category of like a thing that we could never get to.
Yeah, I mean, I get... Maybe the movie doesn't... maybe it does, because it gets me thinking about it. Like, you do understand why Rogers ends up on that cover, right? Because to live a life like that, where you devoted yourself to a message of kindness, even not just on TV, but in every waking moment, the bravery of doing that day after day and staying focused on that, kind of no matter what happens, and that willingness to be that in the moment and that present for anyone he's talking to, like you present, like on paper, you're like, what are you, crazy?
Yeah, like the idea that Fred Rogers exists at all, much less that he exists and had a TV show.
Well, right, and so
and that he carries puppets around with him in a suitcase.
And the thing is, so when you say like we should aspire to that, but by the same token, like it's terrifying to even consider that.
Oh, sure, yeah,
right,
yeah.
And I guess that's where the heroism comes in, because he wouldn't. I mean, because the other thing this movie is good about, and the documentary is good about, is that his humility was such that he didn't ever seem to see it that way.
Sure.
Right. That we know of. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things. I kind of wish there was more of that, I guess.
So what we're saying is watch the documentary too.
Yeah, watch the
to get the
documentary
full
first.
picture.
I say watch
yeah,
the doc first and then see this one. But see this one, even though I might sound a little lukewarm about it, like if only for Tom Hanks's performance, see this movie.
Okay, so what is your number then?
What did I say?
You said 7.
7.
I'm saying 7.2.
I'm saying 7.5.
We're not that far away from each other. Our number's a 7.1. It's at 96% on the
That can't
tomato
be
meter.
right.
It is.
96%.
7.1, 7.
It's 21.7 divided by 3.
Yeah, well, 7.2. 3 even if you wanted to be generous.
Okay, all right, sorry. Anyway, math is hard.
It is.
If we learn one thing from this show, is that math is hard. Anyway, you should see it.
Yes. Thanks for watching. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on the socials at BeFastAllDay. And won't you check out our Patreon page? Won't you please? At patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. We do extra fun stuff there, including currently recaps of Watchmen and The Mandalorian and The Morning Show and His Dark Materials. We are not recapping Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. You can pretty much guess what happens on those episodes. But actually, I think a bunch of those, there's some sort of PBS Kids thing on Amazon that you can get a 7-day free trial to, and they've uploaded a ton of old vintage Mr. Rogers episodes if you want to watch those. So
Neat.
Just throwing that out there. All right, thanks for watching. Happy Thanksgiving if you're seeing this week, and take care. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.